Okay, so welcome back to Baruch Spinoza. Einstein was asked whether he believes in God or not, and he was quoted as saying, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the lawful harmony of all that exists, but not in a God who concerns himself with the fate and the doings of mankind." Starting with the Spinoza, Spinoza thought, he believed, and in fact he argued that there is a universe which is ruled by the cause and effect of natural laws, without purpose or design. Without purpose, or keep this definition in your mind, because it is very, very important. Without having known this definition, we cannot understand Spinoza. A universe, this universe, the one in which we are living, ruled only by the cause and effect of natural laws. Whatever is happening over here, they are on the basis of natural laws, and those actions, they are without purpose and design. The actions which are taking place over here in the universe, they are actually without a purpose or design. Now, this universe, the one Spinoza is talking about, the God of this universe was a non-interventionist. It doesn't have a God, but if it has a God, Spinoza says he is a non-interventionist. He does not interfere, he does not intervene, whose essence and pervasiveness might best be described as nature. This God, the one in Spinoza's universe, the universe that's been created by Spinoza, within this universe there is one God, and that is nature. But this nature, it is a non-interventionist. It has left the universe to the people to do whatsoever they want to do within it. Okay, now given God's non-interference policy, Spinoza believed the modern state had the responsibility of looking after the common man, and the man had the responsibility of looking after himself. Now Spinoza said that this universe, it has been run by the cause and effect of natural laws without a specific purpose or a design, and since the God has this policy of non-interference, therefore it is the responsibility of the state or of the government to look after the well-being of the people, and it is the responsibility of the people to look after their own well-being. In all this, saw freedom. Spinoza saw freedom and anticipated later philosophical and scientific developments by 2 and sometimes 3 centuries. Okay, in all this, in whatever he thought and in whatever he saw, Spinoza, within all these, he saw freedom. Freedom. What kind of freedom? He saw freedom in different levels and different grounds. But he anticipated those things in his philosophy, and later on they became the foundation for so many other branches of knowledge and for so many other people. Okay, now this is Baruch Spinoza. Baruch Spinoza was born in 1632 and was dead by 1677 at the age of 45. Despite its imposing mathematical structure, the Ethics is basically the name of his book. The Ethics was a heartfelt proposal for a better way to live, a solution to loneliness and isolation, an answer to the suffering and frustration of life. This is a Stoic text that has been quoted regarding the book of Spinoza. Spinoza had written a book which is titled as Ethics, and it has been said about that book, the Ethics, that the book is a heart-filled proposal. It is a very, very good book. That means a heart-filled proposal for a better way to live, a solution to loneliness and isolation. It had got so many things to cover for the poor people. It had got so many things to cover for the sufferings of the human beings. So all in all, this book, the Ethics, has been celebrated. That is what has been the crux of this slide. Okay, and then Baruch Spinoza, there is this very important quotation of his: "I do not know how to teach philosophy without becoming a disturber of established religion." Okay, by religion he does not mean the modern religion, or by religion he does not mean our religion. By religion he meant his own religion, but specifically and generally the prevailing beliefs of his time. He says, I do not know how to teach philosophy without becoming a disturber of established religion. And some of us know how he felt. Some of us know how he felt. You're going to find it out towards the end of this discussion. But to give you a ting of it, Spinoza was to his bones an atheist. Okay, now Benedict D. Spinoza was among the most important of the post-Cartesian philosophers who flourished in the second half of the 17th century. He made significant contributions in virtually every area of philosophy, and his writings reveal the influence of such divergent sources as Stoicism. Now, what is Stoicism, and then what is Jewish rationalism, and Machiavelli and Hobbes and Descartes, and a variety of heterodox religious thinkers of his day. Stoicism is a branch in philosophy where it's all about endeavorance, to endeavor all the pains and sufferings without exposing them to the world. This is basically a period in philosophy. And there is then Jewish rationalism, Machiavelli and Hobbes and Descartes. We have already talked about Descartes. And for the rest of these things, if we keep on talking about it, our slide and its timing, it goes longer, so it's better to find a one-liner definition for them. Since Benedict Spinoza is a post-Cartesian philosopher, and since he has got significant contributions in every area of philosophy, and he has got those close links with Stoicism, Jewish rationalism, Machiavelli, Hobbes and Descartes, and all those other thinkers of the day, based on this reason he is difficult to categorize as a person to a specific era, though he is usually counted along with Descartes and Lebanese as one of the three major rationalists. People believe that these three, Descartes, Lebanese and Spinoza, they are all rationalists. But given Spinoza's devaluation of sense perception as a means of acquiring knowledge, his description of a purely intellectual form of cognition, and his idealization of geometry as a model for philosophy, this categorization is fair. Now, if we categorize him with the rationalist on the basis of his means of acquiring knowledge, because he said that sense or perception or mind is the only means of knowledge, and then his description of purely intellectual form of cognition, that yes, all knowledge, it can be brought into certainty with the help of our intellectual or mental capacity, and this his idealization of geometry. Now Descartes, he also worked in the field of geometry. We have talked about it in the previous video. Based on all these things, we can say that this man, Spinoza, was basically a rationalist. But it should not blind us to the eclecticism of his pursuits. Now, eclecticism is basically the broader range or the openness of Spinoza. Spinoza is basically more comprehensible. He is more open and he is more broader than Descartes and Lebanese. So, but it should not blind us to the eclecticism of his pursuits, his endeavors, his efforts, nor to the striking originality of his thought. His thought, it was very, very original. It wasn't copied from anywhere. He wasn't basically been influenced by anyone. So on the basis of these last two qualities, we can go against this previous opinion of calling him a rationalist. Among philosophers, Spinoza is best known for his Ethics, which is a monumental work that presents an ethical vision unfolding out of a monastic metaphysics in which God and nature are identified. Now, metaphysics is something that is beyond the physical world, and by monastic we mean to say one or single. For him, God is no longer the transcendent creator of the universe who rules it via providence. Providence simply means care or looking after, but nature itself. For Spinoza, the summary of this entire slide is, for Spinoza, there is no difference between God and nature. He says whatever is the universe is God. The universe is God and God is the universe. Everything around us, it has the manifestation, not the manifestation, it has a God within it. in the next slide, where but nature itself understood as an infinite, necessary and fully deterministic system of which humans are a part. Now what is nature? He has defined it. But nature itself, which is understood as an infinite, which cannot be measured, necessary and fully deterministic. Determinism is to pre-decide things. It is a system of predecision of which human beings are a part. Nature is as a whole. Now, as I told you, he calls nature as God. So he says it is a whole and human beings are just a part of it. So humans find happiness only through a rational understanding of the system and their place within it. Now, those human beings who just keep on living within this universe that's been resonated with God, they find happiness within it. But those people, specifically those human beings who understand this universe to be God itself, universe, by universe we include each and everything. This is what Spinoza said, that in everything around us, let it be a stone, let it be a mountain, let it be a tree, let it be a plant, within each of these objects there is God. Okay, so there are some excerpts from Spinoza, where he says the world would be happier if men had the same capacity to be silent on that they have to speak. He says if men have the capacity to be silent on what they have to speak, this world could be a very, very happy place. By that he means to say we do not necessarily say good things all the time. We say bad things too, but if we have the capacity to control the bad things that we say, this world could be a happy place. In the next excerpt, he says, the highest activity a human being can attain is learning for understanding, because to understand is to be free. The highest happiness human beings can attain is through learning for understanding. Now, by understanding, we mean to say when you make your learning a part of your persona, a part of yourself. This is what we call learning for understanding. And for Spinoza, this is the only way or the only source for becoming free. Because he says to understand is to be free. When we learn to understand, to make it a part of ourselves, to internalize it, we become free. Okay, and then he says, I have made a ceaseless effort. Ceaseless means unstoppable effort, not to ridicule, not to make fun, not to bewail, not to show resentment, or not to be saying bad things, not to scorn human beings, not to show hatred towards human actions, but to understand them, but to understand human beings. This is his concept of humanity too. He says, I have started loving human beings despite all their weaknesses and shortcomings. For the radical thinkers of the Enlightenment, now Enlightenment is basically an era in philosophy that followed the rationalists, the radical thinkers, the extremistic kind of thinkers, or one-dimensional thinkers of the Enlightenment era. This man, Spinoza, was the first man to have lived and died as a true atheist. Enlightenment philosophers and writers, they believed that this man, Spinoza, he lived and died as a true atheist. A true atheist. For others, including Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was basically a romantic poet, he provides perhaps the most profound conception of God. The most profound means the most interesting conception of God. We have talked about his concept of God to be something of a resonance with nature, to be found in Western philosophy. So for Taylor Coleridge, for Samuel Taylor Coleridge, his concept of God, which is in resemblance with nature, this was very, very interesting. Then Spinoza was bold enough to defy the thinking of his time, to refuse the thinking of his time, yet he was too modest. Too modest means too down to earth to accept the fame of public office despite numerous offers. This refers to his modesty. He was such a modest person that he was offered professorship and some other jobs and statuses of public offices, but he's refused them all. Now, Spinoza can claim influence on both the Enlightenment thinkers of the 18th century and great minds of the 19th century, notably Hegel, and his ideas were so radical. Spinoza's ideas were so radical, they were so one-dimensional that they could only be fully published after his death. While he was living, his ideas could not be published because there was a threat to his existence, because people, they would have killed him for his ideas. That is why once he was dead, his ideas were published. So over here, but what are the ideas that caused such controversy in Spinoza's lifetime? How did they influence the generations after? And can Spinoza really be seen as the first philosopher of the rational enlightenment in our time? Now, this is a question that's been asked, that whether enlightenment has it come from Spinoza's ideas and concepts. We have to talk about it. Now, Spinoza's thoughts and concepts on determinism. Now, determinism and fatalism, then acceptance and bliss and pantheism. Now, what is determinism? Determinism is basically the belief that all things, they are predetermined by an external force. Whatever comes to us, whatever happens to us, they happen for a reason, and that reason is not decided or determined by the human beings. In fact, they are predetermined. They are determined and decided before they take place. And then fatalism. This is a belief or a concept where we believe that everything that happens to us is basically because of the fate. And then acceptance. Acceptance is referring to the philosophical idea of whatever happens to us, to accept them, that yes, they had to happen. This is what we call acceptance. And then bliss. By bliss we mean to say happiness. And pantheism. By pantheism we simply mean to say to see God in every object around us. So over here, pantheism, it's been discussed. In pantheism we say that God and the universe are one and the same thing. There is no difference between God and universe. Universe is God and God is universe. A universal substance, infinitely modified, which has been evolving. This is a technical solution. Infinitely modified simply means which has been evolving or developing or progressing. This is a technical solution to the mind-body problem. There is a distinction between mind and body for Spinoza, but this is a technical solution. When you say that mind and body, they are the same thing. Mind over here, it refers to God. Body is the universe. Both of them, they are the same in pantheism. Pantheism is basically a concept where we see God in each and every object around us. But is its message of reconciliation between persons, nature and God? Our sense of distance from God is mistaken, but is its message of reconciliation between persons, nature and God? Our sense of distance from God is mistaken. Spinoza believed that our sense of distance from God is mistaken. Most of us, we believe, and in his time people believed that God is a far distant entity. Now, is this distance worth the price of determinism or fatalism? Now, if there is distance, can we say that determinism or fatalism has been caused by God? It is a question that has to be answered. Now, after this, in the next excerpt, he says, whatever happens to us happens for a reason. Now, this is basically the definition of determinism and fatalism. Whatever happens to us happens for a reason. Imagine if somebody meets an accident. We simply say it had to happen. We have to accept it. So when we say it had to happen, it is fatalism or determinism. And when we say we have to accept it because it has come from a greater external force or maybe from God, this is what we call acceptance. Okay, so whatever happens to us for a reason and by necessity, it is pointless to want that which we are not determined to have. Now, if I want something that I do not mean to have, it is pointless. For Spinoza, he says to want something which is not meant for you, it is pointless. Much of what we want, union with other people, oneness with God, we already have that. Now, Spinoza says that we should find out bliss. By bliss, he is referring to happiness. He says, be contented and be satisfied in whatever you have, because you have already been bestowed with people and oneness with people and God. That is why you should be happy rather than being skeptical or rather than being unhappy about this sorry state of affairs. Because for him, he says that it is pointless to want something that is not meant for you. Now, the proper philosophical attitude is acceptance or resignation leading to bliss. He says, if you accept this simple fact that whatever I have, whatever has happened to me, it had to happen. This is acceptance or resignation. Now, when you resign your own free will to God, your own free will to nature, that whatever is going to happen to me will happen or must happen. Spinoza says that this leads you to a happy and contented life. Now, the question is, does Spinoza's version of freedom sound blissful to you? This is what you have to answer. Um, is he appealing to you in that sense of defining happiness, how to be happy? Now over here, we are talking about a contemporary of Baruch Spinoza, who was having sharp and contrasting ideas and concepts to that of Spinoza. Now Baruch Spinoza was the brilliant outcast heretic who broke open the doors to modern thought. He brought this modernism, he brought this revolution in thoughts and ideas with his assertion, with his thought, with his argument that God is essentially nature. He said that nature is God and God is nature, no more and no less. This was very, very clear on part of Spinoza. For him, there was no difference between nature and God. So his great philosophical adversary was the glittering Gottfried Wilhelm Lebanese, defender of the old transcendent God. Now, this man, Lebanese, was basically of the same age. He belonged to the same era as that of Spinoza, but he had contrasting ideas regarding God with Spinoza. Lebanese believed that the old transcendent God, the one in which people believed before Spinoza, that God is the perfect one. And Spinoza, on the other hand, said that there is no concept of God as the one, the transcendental one, or the old one, or the traditional one. For him, God was nature and nature was God. Both of these people, they met, they fought, and the fight goes on today in the dance of humanism and faith. And even today, this fight of Spinoza and Lebanese, that is going on and on. Both of them, they've given certain links to humanism and faith even in today's world. Now over here in Spinoza's time, the question that gripped hidebound thinkers. Hidebound thinkers means biased thinkers, partial, leery, who were very, very cautious of flouting popular opinions. Flouting means defying popular opinions or alienating wealthy patrons. Wealthy patrons mean wealthy people. Was this? There were those thinkers who were totally against Spinoza. Why? Because on the basis of this religious fair, they would extract money from the wealthy people. And since Spinoza was a kind of a person who has come up with his own thoughts and ideas, and if people they had followed him, these hidebound thinkers, specifically religious thinkers, they wouldn't have the leverage of taking money or wealth from those patrons. So they would say, if you believed in Spinoza's God, were you not in actuality an atheist? They would simply ask this question: if you believe in Spinoza's God, you become an atheist. And since you become an atheist, this offense by that time was punishable by exile. And by exile, we mean to say that those people, they would be forced to leave that country and to move to somewhere else. Okay, then there was another punishment of imprisonment, life imprisonment or death. So those people who had the guts or who wanted to follow Spinoza's God, they would be given these kind of punishments, either exile, imprisonment, or death. Now Lebanese, who was the contemporary of Spinoza and was probably the greatest enemy, we can say, or the adversary of Spinoza, he thought so, and many others agreed. Lebanese, he was basically with those religious thinkers or hidebound thinkers of his own time. He made a group, and collectively all of them, they stood against Spinoza. Like the bishop who denounced Spinoza as that insane and evil man who deserves to be covered with chains and whipped with a rod, and the Jewish community of Amsterdam, which excommunicated him. Now, Lebanese and with him was hidebound thinkers of his own time. All of them, they collectively stood against Spinoza, and then they made this one bishop say these words, which are in quotation. That bishop, he denounced Spinoza. By denouncing, he defied and refused. Spinoza said that insane and evil man, that insane means that out of mind and bad man, who deserves to be covered with chains, who deserves to be imprisoned and whipped with a rod and be given severe kind of punishment. And the Jewish community of Amsterdam, which excommunicated him. And then this Jewish community of Amsterdam, they have excommunicated him. They have made him to go into an exile. Now there is this modern philosopher Stewart who basically carried out his research on Lebanese and Spinoza's contemporary and comparative analysis. He says that there is a mystery that grips Stewart is whether Lebanese himself believed in Spinoza's God, cribbed his teaching. Now this man, Lebanese, was a very, very good and cunning kind of a man. He cribbed the entire teachings of Spinoza. He has studied them while pretending unfamiliarity with them. He studied and got ideas and concepts from Spinoza, but then he was pretending that he hasn't learned anything from Spinoza, though deeper down he had studied Spinoza, and cynically invented his own philosophy in reaction to Spinoza's to mask his secret atheism. And then cynically, like cynics, he has invented his own philosophy in sharp contrast or in sharp reaction to Spinoza. Now Stewart says that Lebanese himself was as much an atheist as Spinoza was, but just to have the sympathies of those people of his time, he pretended that he does not know anything about the writings of Spinoza, and he has written things just to stand in front of Spinoza, though Stewart says deeper down, Lebanese himself was a great atheist. When Albert Einstein was asked if he believed in God, the great 20th century scientist reached back to a 17th century philosopher for an answer. We have started with this, and I'm reminding you people of this once again. He said, "I believe," said Einstein, "in Spinoza's God." Baruch Spinoza was the brilliant outcast heretic who broke open the doors to modern thought with his assertion that God is essentially nature, no more and no less. His great philosophical adversary was the glittering Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, defender of the old transcendent God. We have already talked about it, but just for your refreshment of ideas, let's go through it once again, because this is the sole discussion of our today's lecture. Defender of the old transcendent God, they met, they fought, and the fight goes on today in the dance of humanism and faith. Hear about Lebanese, Spinoza, and new telling of the fate of God in the modern world on point. There is this link. If you want to go through it, you can go and you can find that video. Now here is an interesting question for you. Is Spinoza's pantheistic bliss, we have defined pantheism in the previous slides, and is Spinoza's pantheistic bliss a form of Stoicism? Stoicism is, I told you, a way of endurance. So a way of enduring and transcending an unpalatable, uncontrollable. Unpalatable means uncontrollable, unacceptable. An unacceptable reality. Do you see it as resignation or as a more positive vision of life? Okay, so in Spinoza's pantheistic bliss, by that we meant happiness. So is Spinoza's pantheistic bliss a form of Stoicism, where you endure, where you tolerate everything with a smiling face, or does it have the element of transcending an unpalatable, uncontrollable and unacceptable reality, that things which had to happen will happen? Do you see it as a resignation? Do you see that human beings, they have resigned, or as a more positive vision of life? What kind of a choice do we have? If we do not resign, if we do not accept whatever is happening to us, what else do we have? What else do we have? So the question is it a more positive vision of life? This is a question that's been asked. If for you it is yes, fine. If not, we can have discussion over it.